It's really no wonder why the Space Marines are the poster children of 40k. The giant walking tanks that can genuinely sprint through regular people as if they're not there are maybe, in my opinion, the most super soldier feeling super soldiers of any fictional universe that comes to mind. Just one look at the Angels of the Emperor and you will get the vibe of the entire universe, as a universe that needs something like that can't be a very safe one. But the big question that undoubtedly comes up when discussing Warhammer at some point during your Warhammer journey will always be, which Legion has the best vibe of them all? Which Legion is the absolute coolest? And which ones have absolutely trash aura? Well, good news, because I'm here to give the definitive, undeniable, totally true, and codex compliant answer to this totally objective and not at all based in opinion question. This totally isn't a list that changes literally every month. Not at all. So to get started with this absolutely not opinion-based topic, here's how things will go. It'll be a list from number 18 to number 1. I know, very original idea, with a little short explanation of my thoughts on every Legion, extremely short because oh god, we'd be here all day if not. So without further ado, stanced up, high noon on a Wednesday, deep breath, Bricky, this your boy? The Night Lords take everything that makes a Space Marine cool and asks, what if we don't do that? Do they at least make it cool? Hell no! Their entire point is being troops that cause fear in the enemy, as if a regular Space Marine doesn't do that already. And on top of that redundant idea, they're absolute bitches. They never make a stand in a fair fight because they're goddamn cowards, and they only ever go after civilians when they can. They're fucking trash! Believe it or not, the rest of the bottom of the list is probably the hardest to figure out because most of the rest of the legions don't make the horrid mistake of ignoring the fact that they're Space Marines. Having said that, being Space Marine-y doesn't save you from being at the bottom of the list, like with these bland dinkuses. If the Ultramarines are vanilla ice cream, the Black Legion are room temperature water with no ice. They technically take from everyone else's identity and thus don't have an identity of themselves outside of Abaddon and Harken World Claimer. And as we get to the others at the bottom of the list, you'll see that having awesome characters does not save any Legion. You need a vibe. Okay, maybe you need a good vibe. These Twilight motherfuckers are kind of just the most boring versions of what they try to be. They're less interesting pre-heresy Emperor's Children with their arts and crafts, less interesting Space Wolves and World Eaters with their genetic flaws, and less interesting Ultramarines with their general troops. Yes, they have Dante, and Dante and the Sanguinary Guard are fucking awesome. But in as tight of a race as this list is, you can't just be less interesting versions of things further up the list. Okay, so these guys have the exact opposite problem of the Black Legion and the same problem as the Blood Angels. In fact, they're hard carried by their vibe, which is a less interesting version of the Khorne Demons vibe. The World Eaters are essentially trying to be the heavy club beating stick charge at the line badasses that attempt a hand at tragic philosophy. And to me, they fall really, really short of that. Because they don't have a culture other than kill, 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 and they strut around looking exactly like Khorne. In my opinion, if these guys lean more into the whole Hellenic Greek aesthetic that their planet is kind of based on, it would help them a ton. But they don't do that. So bottom third of the list for you. At least they're better than the Blangles. Getting further up the list in the trash heap, we've got the people who would have such a massive dub if they just weren't relegated to being story fodder for the Emperor's Children and directly stealing from the AdMech for what little identity they have. The Iron Hands are saved from tying the goddamn Night Lords by the fact that every single Space Marine vehicle looks so much cooler than every other Chaos Space Marine vehicle, except the Helldrake. And if only Ferrus Manus had the chance to apply his ideology to becoming stronger than the machine in your humanity that he wanted to install in his sons, they would have been saved. And here we have the first spot that I think will genuinely make people mad, despite the fact that I made it clear how unserious and impermanent each ranking here is. I really do not like the vibe of Slenesh. However, the Emperor's Children fix a lot of issues I have with Slenesh, but they're still dragged down a ton by the association. I genuinely really wish there was more of a focus on the twisted beauty aspect and not so much the perfection aspect. Slenesh shouldn't be off-putting to look at, and neither should the EC. To give you an idea of how top-heavy a traditional tier list of this would be for me, we have now reached the legions I genuinely like. And first up, we've got the Dusty Fellows who must have a deathly fear of vacuums. What the Thousand Suns are doing is pretty much a directly better version of what the World Eaters are doing. There is no mistake which god they serve, but their entire vibe is not just Tzeentch. It is Prospero, the Egyptian themes that planet took inspiration from, its master magicians bending the warp to their very whim, and then it is all of that twisted into a lovely color of blue by Tzeentch. Lovely fellas, these boys. For the other side of Tzeentch, we have a legion that isn't related to a chaos god at all. Or are they? The Alpha Legion essentially do what the Night Lords do, but, you know, good. In that it's not just the fear, it's the mistrust, it's the espionage, it's the twisting plans upon plans upon plans coming from abhuman monsters who can still move faster, hit harder, and aim more accurately than you could. These guys are the real bane of most lesser chapters, as their mastery of trickery can rip them apart while they rarely ever have to expend any ammunition. All while they can wait in the chapter master's chambers petting some weird warp cat going, "I've been expecting you." And now we get to my favorite of all the big god legions. The stinkiest fellas, Nurgle's boys. Dad's depressed but hey, fuck him anyway, the Death Guard. At first glance, one might think the Death Guard have the same issue as the World Eaters in that their vibe really isn't related to any kind of culture of their homeworld. But where the World Eaters were lacking something in doing that, the Death Guard pull it off so well, since instead of encapsulating exactly what Nurgle's demons are going for, they represent the other side of death that makes up Nurgle, the slow but inevitable march of it. Always silent but always there. You can't hope to stop it. You can blow a hole in them and they'll just get up, maybe chuckle a little bit and just keep walking. Maybe this is just because I love Nurgle's vibe that much, but I can't help it. You know how you avoid becoming a less good or a less original copy of the demons of every Chaos God? You say fuck it and shove them in a tank. Yes, I'm actually surprised at how low these guys are on the list. The Iron Warriors may be the most unique of the Traitor Legions in that they actively do not like demons, where the other legions don't care or, well, you know. They take the concept of the Iron Hands and actually back it up with some real personality, and despite being involved in maybe one of the most heinous things in 40k, they're probably the most competent of the original 9 Traitor Legions. However, they end up falling short in that they're sort of a mashup between the Iron Hands and the supremely better Legion in the Imperial Fist, so they rest soundly at the bottom of the top half of the list. Yeah, so here's an example of just how much this list changes. Like, actually 2 weeks ago, these guys were fighting for number 1. The Salamanders are maybe the most unique of just the generic Space Marines in that they're kind to a fault to the Imperial citizens around them, while also setting everything on fire with a flamer they made. Honestly, they might be the most fun strategy to use on the tabletop, but for now, 7 other legions have the drop on them in terms of the coolness factor. Unlike the Night Lords, the Raven Guard take the let's not do what Space Marines usually do concept and absolutely run with it. They're the snipers on the hill picking off enemies from afar, and when the enemy gets there, I mean it's a goddamn Space Marine, what are they going to do about it? If they can even focus on them long enough to defend themselves. The Phobos armor, much like every new Primaris armor, is cool as hell, and it helps these guys pull off the whole new recon concept. These guys are only really held out of the top third of the list by the fact that they suffer from Iron Hand level lack of writing or attention from GW. And here, introducing us to the top third of the list, we have the regular old Blueberries. The legion everyone calls the vanilla ice cream of Space Marines, which I really never understood. Because while these guys are the most Space Marines, and yes, they did suffer from god-awful writing like a decade ago, the entire appeal of the Ultramarines is that they're the ones who follow the Codex to a T, attempting to be the gold standard for all of the other legions, and yet that ends up being their greatest weakness as well. Seeing them grapple with this, as well as them having a very agreeable color scheme, is what won them this first of top tiers. Ultramar sweet! So, how do you avoid being overtaken by the identity of the 4 Chaos Gods for your Legion's identity? Say fuck it and worship all of them at once. The Wordbearers are genuinely better generalist Chaos Space Marines than the Black Legion. There's a very real and super on-theme reason for every single CSM model to be there, and that theme belongs to nobody but the Wordbearers. Where the Black Legion struggles to include the mortal cultists in the imagery of the Legion, the Wordbearers genuinely rely heavily on them. Need a tank? It's piloted by somebody who worships Tgirl. Need some mounted cavalry? They're a bunch of speed freaks trying to be the fastest for Slenesh. Need a warpsmith? He's currently trying to fulfill the contract with Vashtor. This genuinely deep flavor goes on and on and on, and it's fantastic. And now we get to the Mongol Empire, baby! The White Scars are honestly the most visually distinct of the Space Marines who are just Space Marines, meaning the ones that don't have their own special codex supplements, in that they do their own thing while still only having access to the basic Space Marine units. The free-spirited warriors flying around on their bikes taking genuine joy in battle, the importance of the culture within the chapter, and the focus on the warriors' individual stability is just so enticing with these guys. And a big plus side, the Space Marine armor looks fucking gas in solid white. The importance of the talk of theming so far has been pretty obvious, with it literally making or breaking many other legions. So with that in mind, it's kind of a no-brainer that the Legion with 6 fucking themes, as overcrowded as it makes them seem, would at least ensure that the Dark Angels float around the upper half of the list. And indeed, as much as this list changes, they have never gone under number 7. They genuinely have something for everyone, with any of the 6 wings being for your open choosing. While they don't entirely get the speedy aesthetic down as much as the White Scars do, they do Terminators the absolute best of any other Legion, which of course is to be expected given the lore. And on top of that, they absolutely destroy any other Legion when it comes to the Knight aesthetic, with the Deathwing Knights Terminators. There's a damn good reason why the Lion was the second Primarch to return, and indeed why the Dark Angels are so loved. Glory to the first. Yeah, suck it, K-Sons. The Space Wolves are probably one of the coolest legions to ever exist. Combining the infinitely winning strategy of copying Viking aesthetics with one of the absolute most badass cultures of all the Space Marines, and solving the Codex problem by giving the Blueberry Boy Scouts the big old finger, ends up making for one of the most unique and interesting setups for Space Marines of any legion. They do what the World Eaters do better. They do what the White Scars do better. They figured out how to get a Space Marine drunk, and they feast away telling legends of even mortal soldiers who work with them. The Volca Fenrica apply the absolute best situation of casting the aesthetics of Space Marines aside, but even they can't be beat by the best application of being true to what makes a Space Marine a Space Marine. The time for speeches is done. The first and greatest test is here. My order to you all is simple, yet heed it well and exert yourselves to see it done. They are coming. Kill them all. The Imperial Fists of the Emperor himself took what the Ultramarines put forward with the Codex Astartes and perfected it to make it their very own identity. The teachings of the master of the construction of the Imperial Palace, Rogel Dorn, ring true even to this day. You set the lines. Vow to those behind you that they shall not be crossed, and you see it done. Should your brothers fall beside you, make sure the enemy pays for it in blood 100-fold. And should you still draw breath, the line you promise to defend shall never falter, even if you must man that line yourself. They are the assurance that the dark cannot swallow the light, and that the Imperium of Man cannot and will not fall to the throes of chaos. For the fists, for Dorn, for the Emperor. Now, about this time would be when I would set a little dancing engineer dude at the bottom of the screen and start winding down to end the video. But this time I wanted to do something different. As we reach the middle of the year and come upon the most bleak Pride Month I have ever been personally a part of, I wanted to take a second and sincerely thank the Warhammer community. Back during the 2 months of turmoil where anti-woke groups were trying to overtake the hobby and force the original community out, I remember thinking that I've never seen a more staunch and firm rejection of those hateful people from any community. It's made for the single most comfortable experience I've had with any community, and it's appreciated so very much. Sincerely, thank you all. You should feel so very proud of yourselves. And with that, that's the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all tune in next week for the next episode of this series. Thanks again, and take care.